Tonight, I am going to start my segment with explaining few phrases that have been used and abused and emptied of their meaning. And the first I will start with is the Palestinian people. When we speak about the Palestinian people, most people think of the Palestinians who live in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And the fact is, the Palestinian people are more than 17 million Palestinians. Half of them live in the diaspora as refugees and hold other nationalities, and the other half live in historical Palestine, divided by the colonial state of Israel between Gaza Strip, the West Bank, 1948, and Jerusalem. The second thing I want to clarify is often when people speak about Palestine or the Palestinian-Israeli conflict or the Jewish-Arab problem, these are all misleading terms, and I'll explain. A good percentage of the Israeli Jews in Israel are Arabs. They come from Egypt, from Libya, from Tunisia, from Morocco, and from Iraq and Yemen and other Arab countries. And we're talking about more than 50% of the Jewish Israeli population in Israel. Number two, if we speak about the Israelis, the term is not politically correct because Israel as we stand today has 10 million people living in it. 20%, which is a little over 2 million of those Israelis who hold Israeli documents are actually Palestinians. So when we use the term Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's very misleading and confusing. When we use the Arab-Jewish issue, it's also very misleading and confusing. And it's not a real state dispute between two national groups, but rather a struggle for civil and political rights within a single political entity. So the conflict's roots and the right term to use, it's simply not between two national movements with equal claims, but is fundamentally a project of settler colonialism versus indigenous resistance. The other issue I want to talk about is very important and sensitive to the Palestinian people, which is the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and the PNA, the Palestinian National Authority. The PLO, as they represent themselves, and if anybody here is not familiar with the PLO, it's represented by Hussam Zumlot in London, who doesn't represent me or any of the Palestinians I speak on behalf. The PLO, they represent themselves as the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. There is some truth to that, but let's see by who. The PLO was initiated by Nasser, the late Egyptian president, and the PLO is the sole representative and legitimate, the only sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people according to two entities. The first one is the resolutions of the Arab League and the recognition of the United Nations. None of the Palestinians who live in historical Palestine or in the diaspora were consulted or asked whether they chose this political elite to represent them or not. There has never been one election through which this group was chosen. The term the sole representative of the Palestinian people was first declared in Rabat in one of the Arab League summits and was acknowledged by the United Nations. And the head of the PLO is also the head of the theoretical state of Palestine that was declared in 1988. When the PLO was created in 1964 for the liberation of Palestine, Palestine as they refer to is Palestine as we all call for its liberation today, from the river to the sea. Please note that 1964, when the PLO was created, this was before the 1967 war. And now the PLO changed its speech and its constitution, and they changed the map of Palestine, historical Palestine, limited it to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, shrinking it to less than 20% of historical Palestine, changed the constitution of the Palestinian people that they claim to represent without consulting a soul, a Palestinian soul. And we all know if a country, an existing country, want to change its constitution or its flag or any fundamental structure in that country, a majority of 2/3 of the people's consent is required, and that's the minimum. And if the PLO and the Palestinian National Authority claim to be the sole representative of the Palestinian people, where are they from what's happening in Gaza? Where are they from what's happening in the West Bank? All their statements that we hear is that they have nothing to do with this. Nobody consulted them about going to 7th of October and any act of resistance. As a Palestinian, I stand with the resistance. I stand with resisting occupation. I stand with resisting oppression. I stand with resisting colonialism. I stand with the resistance against segregation. I stand against ethnic cleansing. And as a Palestinian, when I stand against all of these things and I label myself as a pro-resistance, I refuse to be demonized or labeled as anti-Semitic or a terrorist. Resistance is very, very important to our very own existence as human beings.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Now I come to the term free Palestine. I come to the term liberation of Palestine. This is often misunderstood, is often equated with a lot of misleading statements and phrases. To us, the Palestinians, and I am a Palestinian who come from the West Bank, who went to Gaza, I went to prison, I spoke to people in the diaspora, and I'm in touch with lots of Palestinian voices. Our consensus to liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea means, and this is very important, toppling the existing regime in Israel. We don't have a problem with the Israelis. We don't have a problem with Jewish people. We only have a problem with the Israeli regime. This Israeli regime is the problem. The problem is not the Israelis. The problem is not the Jewish people. The problem is simply a regime. And to change that regime, you need a majority. This regime currently controls the life of about 17 million people from the river to the sea and imposes different rules on different groups in that land. So this existing regime gives Israeli Jews full citizenship and voting rights, while it gives Palestinian citizens of Israel citizenship but face systematic discrimination. Palestinians who live in East Jerusalem are permanent residents. They have the right to remain, like you give to newly immigrated people here in England. Palestinians in the West Bank live under military law with no political rights, and Palestinians in Gaza live under a blockade, and they're going through a genocide now. 8 million Palestinian refugees are denied the entry at all, and all their rights are being denied. This regime is what we have a problem with, and this regime has got to go. Now I come to why we reject a two-state solution. So, first of all, a two-state solution is no longer viable, practically speaking. Decades of Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank has intentionally and irreversibly destroyed the possibility of a continuous, viable, sovereign Palestinian state. Please note that over 750,000 Israeli settlers now live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, connected by a network of Israeli-only roads, military checkpoints, watching towers, and other military infrastructure. This have carved up the West Banks into disconnected Bantustans. The other thing is the geographic impossibility. A future of a Palestinian state would not have any control over its borders, airspace, or water resources, and would be economically strangled, and it would be a state in name only, with Israel retaining ultimate security control. The other reason is, in best case scenarios, this state will only be established on 20% of the space of historical Palestine, which means canceling the right of return to 8 million Palestinian refugees who live worldwide. Half of them, by the way, are in Jordan. The other reason is the settlement project has progressed so far that physically removing hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers to create a Palestinian state is politically impossible inside Israel. Therefore, pursuing a two-state solution is futile exercise that will only prolong the conflict and the occupation. And the most important reason why we Palestinians refuse a two-state solution is that the Zionist movement is a colonial project that displaced the indigenous Palestinian population. The two-state solution is a compromise that legitimizes the colonial conquest of 1948, the Nakba, by allowing Israel to retain its spoils of war while giving the Palestinians a shrunken fragment on the remnants of the West Bank. Now we come to the one-state solution and why we stand for that solution. First of all, the one-state solution to us as Palestinian is a perspective grounded on principles of equality, decolonization, and practical reality. A one-state solution proposes a single state where all people living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike, Palestinians and non-Palestinians, have equal citizenship, equal rights, and equal vote in a shared government. This is the only ethical alternative to a system of perpetual separation and inequality. The right of return for Palestinian refugees has always been a central pillar of the Palestinian cause and a major sticking point in two-state negotiations. The one-state framework offers more direct path to addressing it, where in a two-state model, Israel has always rejected the right of return of millions of Palestinian refugees to their original homes. Now Israel, fearing it would alter the Jewish demographic charter of the state, compromises often involve financial compensation and limited family reunions, which many Palestinians see as an abandonment of fundamental rights. In a single state, with a constitution guaranteeing equal rights of return of refugees, the return of those refugees would not threaten the demographics dominance of one group over another, because citizenship and rights would not be tied to ethnic identity or religion. The practical implementation of this would be complex, but politically and ideologically, the barriers is going to be removed. The two-state solution is a fiction that masks an unsustainable and unjust reality of apartheid and permanent occupation. Pursuing it will only delay the inevitable reckoning. The one-state solution, while incredibly challenging, is the only honest and ethical path forward. It confronts the reality on the grounds and seeks to replace a system of ethnic separation with a single democracy based on universal rights for everyone living on that land, offering a potential long-term solution to a century of conflict. However, the immense political and psychological barriers makes its implementation seem distant. We see it very, very, very close.